this discussion in this slide out to talk about the crisis in trust in food supply chains. It's not just about chickens. I mean, there are folks who mutate chicken, or little and mutilate chickens. Probably mutate them as well, but restriction of movement, sick cows going into the ground beef supply chain. People don't trust really complicated supply chains. Not restricted to food, but food's a really good example of it. So if you're somebody who's operating a traditional food supply chain, this is a problem for you. But if you're somebody who is looking at alternatives, then this is an opportunity for you. So the concern about big supply chains drives local sourcing, it drives more sustainable choices. People just have greater trust in co-ops. It's one of the reasons farmers markets have blossomed. And this has spawned just a series of measurement indicators, which are really quite good, but there might be some better ways to look at it. Water intensity and food miles are a couple of the ones that come to mind in here, related to a food supply chain. Which brings us to, if you think about the outcome of those problems, use of toxics in a food supply chain can be looked at as an environmental issue. Use of water in a food supply chain can be looked at as an environmental issue. But at the root, when people rebel against the supply chain, they're rebelling against the social issues. Oh, this is an example. Nike just fundamentally misunderstood the expectations of consumers and the rights of workers, and all the people in that supply chain felt that their trust had been violated. I don't know whether the system we're using here allows me to bring on each slide a series of when you cascade content, because I think maybe it doesn't. I think that might have been the problem with the last slide or 2 slides ago. But what appears on the bottom of this slide when I try to bring it up, is okay. Here we go. Is the changes that have been made within Nike really have gotten them an awful lot of really good press around being capable of addressing the issues for which they are criticized. But it's arguable that that's meaningless. Once you violate the trust, once you move from I've got a problem with the supply chain to a social problem that people rebel against, once that happens, there literally is almost no going back. Nike's experience advanced expectations of customer responsibility in just a fundamental way. The compliance is assumed, best practices, not just meeting minimal government standards wherever you are in the world. But it's not just a matter of the U.S. North America has a lot of locations where environmental compliance isn't enough. We have some states that don't do a very good job of it, as well as Torres in Mexico, as well as South America. It's about good environmental practices beyond compliance. Maybe compliance with labor standards may be enough. Compliance with environmental standards isn't enough. And that expectation to move beyond compliance, to have a sustainability program, to actually be taking responsibility for these issues within your organization. So I want to. This might be one where I'm not sure the cascade of content is going to work as well. But there's a company I work for. This is real. The picture's not associated with this. I'm not going to violate your trust and use a picture of their operation. But you can see these folks here. A socially conscious brand, a marketed socially responsibility, lots of good environmental practices in terms of design and their fiber choices, and 100% outsourced production, of which 80%, a little more than 80%, is located in China. So in that context, I want you to look at this photo and tell me if you think this presents a problem. Okay, this is a building where this is a different building, but this is essentially similar to the building that they produce their product in. The building that they produce their product in has 12,000 people in the same building. Now it's China. But if you say that you're socially conscious and then you do something a little different, you may think you're doing well, but you've got to meet the expectations of the people who are paying for your product. And if, as I said, these are if you looked at that list, these are pretty expensive products. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with this factory. There's 12 people living in each dormitory room. That's very Chinese, very standard. But I'm not quite sure that the American consumer would look at this and find that to be in concert with the brand. And when you purport a brand to be something, you better back it up. So I wonder about this. It's something I've talked to them about. They don't necessarily buy into it yet, but I hope they buy into it before they have a Nike type problem. Then there's environmental issues in the supply chain. As I mentioned before, you can have an environmental problem, and that environmental problem can live within your supply chain on its own. But there's social faces to environmental problems. Environmental problems cause social impacts. Social impacts sometimes cause environmental problems. But in your supply chain, it flows from the environmental to the social. You have got to baseline and measure both your environmental and the social impacts in your supply chain. This is a picture that I didn't take, but I did some work in this Louisiana in a parish where the factory in the background is creating vinyl chloride. And the people who live in that area are very poor, much more poor now than they used to be after hurricanes. But my point is, there's a social face in the environmental problem. This factory has an environmental problem. People in the PVC supply chain have a social problem, and that's what really gets people angry, is the social component of that problem. The basic way you're making value, if you've done other parts of the sustainable brand, Symbolic Media, Bootcamp, you've seen similarities to this. You're reducing cost, you're creating a brand halo effect, or you're generating new revenue. I mean, those are my three. People describe them in different ways. This is the way I describe them. So you're either, really concretely addressing sustainability practices in your business operations, supply chain. This is where we get a lot of it, to yield efficiencies and reduce costs. The brand halo effect, doing the right thing. I mean, a company doing the right thing. We're not out there talking about it, necessarily connecting it to our product, to our brand. Maybe we are, but we're recognized as doing the right thing. Supply chain has an awful lot of opportunity to enhance brand image, and in some cases just not detract from it. And then generating new revenue. I mean, there's things. Supply chain's not the place that you start new revenue necessarily. You start a new product. You may need a new supply chain in order to actually call that a more sustainable product. So, creating a value chain. We need to talk about some cost considerations. Certain that the consumer and stakeholder expectations are real and evolving. It's also certain they aren't willing to absorb increased costs. I mean, not everybody's going to pay for everything that you do. So it's important to include value considerations in the development of your supply chain program and cost savings really early in whatever work plan you put together to achieve, to implement that more sustainable supply chain program. There are many opportunities for cost savings. A lot of companies don't measure the right things in the supply chain, so they have a hard time seeing the cost savings. So we're often when we're creating a new supply chain, we're actually putting a different set of business metrics in place. If you don't have a good view to cost, and you reduce energy use, can you actually find it? Even if you own your own transportation, distribution, logistics system, do you actually measure that? More people do now than used to, but you've got to be able to measure it in order to actually justify the cost. If you outsource your production, quite often these are things that aren't negotiated and need to be negotiated because there are immense opportunities for your savings as well as your partner savings. I'll show you some companies